Mohammed Al-Bashir is appointed the head of Syria's transitional government until 2025. Former Syrian Prime Minister Al-Jalali agrees to transfer power to the opposition-led Salvation government. And Syria files a UN complaint demanding an end to Israeli aggression during the transition period. It's 4 p.m. Cairo local time and you're now watching Q News. I'm Henny Saif and we'll begin today's news bulletin with the latest developments in Syria. Head of the Syrian Salvation Government, Mohammed Al-Bashir, has officially been appointed head of the transitional government and is set to manage affairs until March 1st of 2025. In today's session, Al-Bashir confirmed the transfer of files between the Salvation Government and the previous cabinet to ensure continuity. He emphasized that the focus was on transferring executive powers and overseeing government operations during the transitional period. Earlier, former Syrian Prime Minister Mohammed Al-Jalali announced his decision to transfer power to the Salvation government aligned with Syrian opposition factions. Al-Jalali held discussions with Hayat Tahrir al-Sham leader Ahmad al-Shara, also known as Abu Muhammad al-Julani, to outline the transition process. This development follows the earlier appointment of Mohammed Al-Bashir to form a new transitional government. The UN Special Envoy to Syria, Geir Pedersen, has called the recent developments in Syria unexpected. At a press conference, Pedersen described Syria as being at a crossroads after al-Assad's regime fell, urging unity among factions and calling for an end to the northern conflict and Israeli strikes. Pedersen emphasized maintaining public institutions, achieving stability and supporting humanitarian aid. He stressed implementing inclusive transitional arrangements in Damascus to represent all Syrians. Syria's permanent UN representative Qusay al-Dahaq says Syria has filed a complaint with the UN Security Council and Secretary General Antonio Guterres calling for an end to Israel's aggression and preventing Israel from benefiting from Syria's regime change. Al-Dahaq stated that Syria's UN mission and embassies will continue operations during the transition, with the foreign minister still active in Damascus. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu affirmed that the occupied Syrian Golan Heights will remain part of Israel and ordered the military to seize the buffer zone along the Syrian border, with backing from Defense Minister Israel Katz and the Security Cabinet. Egypt's Foreign Minister Badr Abdulati has emphasized that Syria's political process should be fully Syrian-owned, free from external interference. He stressed on the importance of preventing any attempts to undermine Syria's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Abdulati called for an inclusive political approach that ensures stability and reflects Syria's societal diversity without excluding any national factions. He reiterated the need for a political process that fosters unity, supporting the long-term goal of restoring stability to Syria. The spokesman for Antonio Guterres, Stephanie Dujarric, has expressed that the UN wants the best possible future for the Syrian people and one that they choose themselves. Earlier on Monday, the UN refugee chief called for patience as millions of Syrian refugees displaced by the 13-year-old civil war weigh a possible return to the country after the toppling of President Bashar al-Assad.
And on the return
of refugees, obviously it will, listen, people are...
Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov has said that it was Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's personal decision to step down and leave his country. Peskov added that the Kremlin stresses the need for a deep analysis of the developments in the Middle East after the fall of Bashar al-Assad's regime in Syria over the weekend. The Gulf Cooperation Council has condemned the ongoing attacks by the Israeli occupation forces on Syrian territory. Earlier, Saudi Arabia condemned Israel's actions of seizing the buffer zone in the occupied Syrian Golan Heights and targeting Syrian territories, highlighting Israel's continued violations of international law. The Saudi Foreign Ministry stressed that these actions undermine Syria's chances for security, stability, and territorial integrity. Israel has denied reports that its forces advanced beyond the buffer zone separating the Israeli-occupied Syrian Golan Heights from Syrian territory. Syrian sources, however, claim the incursion extended as far as 25 kilometers from Damascus. One source reported that Israeli forces reached Qatana, a town just east of the buffer zone and a short distance from Damascus International Airport. The Israeli military reportedly began seizing control of the demilitarized buffer zone over the weekend. The area was established under a 1974 ceasefire agreement between the two countries. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has unveiled measures to address threats linked to the potential collapse of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's regime. Netanyahu has instructed Israeli forces to secure the buffer zone and strategic locations, including Jabal al-Sheikh. He also hinted at possible opportunities for a detainee exchange deal as part of the ongoing developments. Two Syrian security sources have reported that Israeli planes bombed 3 major Syrian army air bases, housing dozens of helicopters and jets in the largest strike on air bases since Bashar al-Assad's overthrow. The sources said the Qamishli air base in northeast Syria, the Shinshar base in the countryside of Homs, and the Aqraba airport in southwest Damascus were all hit. Israel also waged several strikes on a research center on the outskirts of Damascus and a center for electronic warfare near the Sayyida Zainab area of the capital. A monitor of Syria's war has reported recording more than 300 Israeli strikes since the fall of Bashar al-Assad's regime over the weekend. According to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, Israeli warplanes have targeted factories in Aleppo belonging to the Syrian Air Force, as well as weapons and ammunition warehouses on the outskirts of Damascus, along with several other locations across Syria. The attacks included a wide range of military assets in provinces such as Deir ez-Zor, Hama, Homs, Al-Hasaka, Latakia, Damascus, Rif Dimishq, Daraa, Qintira, and Aleppo. A spokeswoman for Iran's government, Fatima Mohajirani, has said 4,000 Iranian citizens have returned to the country from Syria since the overthrow of al-Assad. Speaking at a press conference in the capital, Muhajirani said the citizens left on 10 flights organized by the Iranian airline Mahan. Britain's Prime Minister Keir Starmer has said the UK must now talk to regional and global allies about a political way forward for Syria. Starmer added that the situation in the country was volatile after Syrian armed groups seized the capital Damascus on Sunday. British Senior Minister Pat McFadden said earlier that the UK could rethink its proscription of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham as a banned organisation after the group spearheaded the Syrian rebel alliance that helped oust al-Assad. Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan has said Turkey is opening its Yaladagi border gate with Syria to manage the safe and voluntary return of the millions of Syrian migrants it hosts. The Yaladagi crossing, which is close to the northwest edge of Syria, has been closed since 2013 due to fighting near the border. NATO member Turkey hosts around 3 million Syrian migrants and refugees, making it the biggest host of Syrians who have fled the civil war.
Bilinmemiş, manası anlaşılmamıştır. Esed
Hundreds of Syrians, including refugees, have started leaving Lebanon for their homes after armed forces took control of Damascus. According to official figures, Lebanon hosts more than 2 million Syrian refugees, including nearly 300,000 who are not officially registered with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. Lebanon's northern provinces have recorded a displacement movement from border villages inside Syria to the city of Hermel, opposite the Syrian town of Qusayr. The Lebanese General Security has closed most land crossings with Syria except for Masna, easing return procedures for refugees. Qatar has announced launching an airlift to provide humanitarian aid to Syrian people following the fall of the Bashar al-Assad regime. The Qatari Foreign Ministry said that under the directions of the country's Emir, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, the first Qatari military cargo plane arrived in Turkey's southeastern Gaziantep city, carrying food and medical assistance provided by the Qatar Fund for Development. Austria's Chancellor has stated that his country supports Syrians wishing to return home. That came as European countries began preparing plans to deport Syrian refugees as a response to the rising calls for deportation in the past year, fueled by the growing influence of far-right anti-immigration parties. Austria announced plans to deport Syrian migrants following al-Assad's regime downfall. Similarly, Belgium, France, Greece and Germany suspended processing asylum applications from Syrians. For another consecutive day, tensions have escalated in the occupied Syrian Golan Heights as Israeli actions draw widespread regional condemnation.